We're just getting ready to get started. So almost there. Okay, it looks like it's 2 o'clock. Everybody comfortable with getting started now, I would think. So I just want to thank you for joining us today for our session. We are very happy. We wish the times were different and that this were being done under different circumstances. But Unique Venues is nonetheless glad that we are able to pull together a panel of industry experts today. We have 500 people. We are full. We are able to take 500 people on our webinar, and I believe we had 540 registers, so the first 500 get in the doors. I want to take a moment to thank our panel of experts for joining us today. One of the benefits of our hospitality industry is that we are a closely knit group of people, and you'll always get to meet people along the way. And our panel has been put together by a wide range of experts in the field that we've had the opportunity to come across in our operations from Unique Venues. Before I introduce the panelists, I just want to let you know the other folks who were with us today from Unique Venues. We've got Allison Salem, who's our Director of Marketing. She will be handling the Q&A, which we'll tell you a little bit about in a moment. We also have Neil Burgart, our COO, who you cannot see because he is double dutying on dog duty, I believe, right now. So he may have to be torn away to calm a barking dog down. So he's on mute. But he will be handling our polling, which I'll tell you a little bit about today. But let me introduce our 4 panelists. First of all, I'd like to introduce Tiffany Melton, a certified meeting professional. She's Vice President for Strategic Meetings Management at SPARGO. She is actually just up the road from me right now in Northern Virginia. And so Tiffany, welcome, and thank you for being part of our panel today. Second, we have Mark Cooper. He's the CEO at IACC, the International Association of Conference Centers. He is the CEO worldwide. So IACC has a number of different subgroups geographically located throughout the world. And Mark is the worldwide CEO. And he right now is located in the heart of England, not far from Warwick Castle. So for him, it's about 6:02, I think, or maybe it's 7:02 now if you changed your clocks, PM. So he's joining us after hours. Third, we have Erik Hansen. He's the co-founder and CEO at Mechanic, which is a marketing firm here, also located in Northern Virginia. Erik was somebody we had hoped to use in a future one, and he got to step in for us today because the speaker we had planned, Juliana Catrancha, has had to reschedule for our next expert panel. We're really excited to have Erik and his expertise with us today. And our 4th panelist is Joel Hauff. Joel is the Director of Research, Education, and Consulting here at Unique Venues. And Joel is a financial and economics whiz. He retired from his job at the University of Arizona at the end of December, and we've been waiting for years for that to happen so that we can bring him onto our team. So now he's part of the full-time Unique Venues team. So thank you, panelists, for joining us. As far as how today will operate, when you look at your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A box. You can submit your questions through that Q&A box, and then there is an opportunity as participants to upvote or downvote a question. With 500 participants, unfortunately, we won't have the time to ask all of the questions that you may have. Nonetheless, we want to go ahead and make sure those questions get asked that a lot of people universally want to have answered. In addition, there is a chat box. So if you have any comments to share or other questions to ask of the group, you can also use the chat box as well. And then the third thing we want to say is one of the things we do in all of our webinars is that we have begun a polling process. And so we will ask pointed questions throughout today's session that we gather information on. At the end of this session, we are recording the entire session. And so you'll be able to see and hear the entire proceeding of today's webinar. And you'll also be able to get all of the responses to the polling questions that we have. All of that will be uploaded most likely by tomorrow at uniquevenues.com/resources. So we do ask that when we post those polling questions up there, that you take a second to go ahead and respond. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started. with, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here as soon as I figure out how to do that. But we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question to our panel. And that first question is, following this crisis, how can a venue set themselves apart from others to show planners that they're ready, willing, and able to meet the demands of a heavily impacted industry? How can they demonstrate that they're addressing the individual fears of the industry proactively? And then I'd like you to vice versa that from a planner side. How can planners do the same, set themselves apart from other organizations and associations when they're working with venues to go ahead and reassure those venues that they're alive and well and they're going to be doing their business? So let's go ahead. I'm gonna go first. How about to you, Mark?
Good afternoon from England. Thank you. How do venues go about addressing this opportunity, or rather seizing this opportunity? Because that's absolutely the case in point. This is all about defining the connections that we make now with our customers. The way that we support and not sell to our customers is what's going to define us when we come out of this situation. So my advice to the venues is, think about all of those opportunities to support your client, that when you were running the property, when you were serving the lunches, when you were working with your operational teams and your executive chef who couldn't leave the kitchen, well, guess what? Now they're available. So now's the time to start looking into the future for your clients, bringing in your executive chef. Look at, everybody's using Zoom now from a personal perspective if they were not a few weeks ago. Bring in your executive chef, have one of those 1 hour cappuccino hours where your exec chef can be talking about how to build a inclusive menu, or even just bring in your bar supervisor and ask them to be able to make the perfect gin and tonic and get as many of your customers onto that webinar and part of that social hour as you can. Because like I say, now's the opportunity to show your forward thinking and to start to train together so that when we come out of this and start planning meetings, we can do so with some of that groundwork already in place.
Great. Thank you so much. Tiffany, what thoughts do you have to share?
I think I, echo a lot of what's been said. I think the other aspect of this is flexibility. As we sort of look at what the landscape is going to be, hopefully very soon as we all return to planning face-to-face events, I think there's going to be a sort of new normal as it relates to virtual meetings and those becoming consistently hybrid meetings. And so making sure that technology infrastructure at venues that you're going to can support that level of technology requirement so that attendees from around the world, even those attendees that may not have ever been able to come to your live event, as you look to doing a virtual or hybrid component, can participate fully moving forward. So definitely making sure infrastructure is in place, I think, will be critical.
Excellent. Erik, anything you'd like to add to this conversation? Because the next question I'm bringing straight to you.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I think radical transparency internal to your venues and to your teams is going to be really important. So making sure that if your venue is trying to set them apart and is ready and prepared when we come out of this, that your entire team understands and has the demonstrated and documented processes and systems to show that that they're ready to handle people coming back into these venues. So I think really being transparent with your teams is going to be hugely important to being successful in this, and how your company and your organization is handling these moments of crisis.
Excellent. Thank you. Joel, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I think one of the biggest things that you can be doing right now to stand apart, whether you're a planner or a venue, is simply building relationships, right? Taking this time when normally you might be frantic doing something else, planning the event or running around and worrying about what's happening with summer conferences or whatever might be going on in your world, and use this time to connect with people. Connect with them on LinkedIn, connect with them on Facebook, connect with them by, you know, following up after these things. We've been overwhelmed actually at Unique Venues by the response that we've gotten. The fact that we now have 410 people participating in this is just absolutely incredible to us, because I'm not sure that we've ever had more than about 100 people participate in one of our sessions. And so this is the time, I think, to rely on relationships, because once this crisis ends, those relationships are going to be what help us rebound and find the new business or find the places to meet and get that moving as quickly as we can. And all of the other things, the flexibility, the expertise, all that stuff will flow from the people that you work with right now.
Great, thank you. You know, when you were speaking, I think it was Tiffany and Erik said something that really resonated with me. And I was thinking about, you know, those of us who were old enough to remember 9/11 from a meetings and events professionals standpoint, we can remember how deeply 9/11 impacted our industry on a worldwide basis, not just in the United States, and that people were leery of flying or getting on a plane. They were afraid to be kind of stuck somewhere, because many people were stuck for a long time, many places. For life to get back to normal took a long time. And while this is a very different kind of crisis than 9/11, we, in a sense, have a situation where some people might be feeling hesitant or a little bit oppressed to try to think about doing business as usual. From a viewpoint of how to do outreach to people, whether you're a planner who needs to do outreach to your membership to get them to come back and attend and register to go to the conferences that you'll once again be planning, or whether you're a venue professional whose job it is to reach out through marketing and sales efforts to try to get planners to come back and to feel confident to come back. What are some actual tips that you could provide as far as the kind of messaging people need to see and hear right now? I'll let you go first, Erik, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I think really trust is going to come from authenticity, not opportunity. And I think right now, what we're seeing and working with our clients and talking to the associations, nonprofits, meeting planners that we're working with is this is about a time, and I think this is going to be for the indefinite future, is you really need to come out with an empathetic and authentic message and story, and not try to present a story of readiness or being too overly opportunistic. I think it was Mark who said this early on, right? Now is the time to communicate how you can help each other and how you are stronger partners together. And that's really what's important right now, is avoiding, you know, we talked about this briefly, not being paralyzed, but also not getting ahead of ourselves. We don't know what 9 months looks like from now, and I don't care who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's about having empathy and heart. If you don't have empathy and heart together, then you're not going to have the level of relationship or develop the relationship that you need to. And you know, when you asked the question of what happened after 9/11, well, you know, that everything changes, but nothing is going to be different. So we will be negotiating contracts between venues and meeting planners. That happened before, that will happen again. But the elements and the reasons behind, you know, what constructs and what that contract needs to look like is going to be totally different. So you've got to get under the skin and understand the environment that your client is in. You've got to understand if it's a association that's bringing their conference back after postponement, or if it is a, you know, sales organization. You know, they're going to have different issues that they didn't have the last time you negotiated a contract, and you'll be doing yourself a disservice and you'll be pushing your client back in the wrong direction if you don't understand those and give the time to be able to understand it. So you absolutely have this opportunity now in the coming weeks to start to strategically gather your thoughts and and put yourself in the shoes of your customers and the meeting planners, and be able to say, right, when we get back around the table, when we're talking about that event, wherever it comes, in the fall, in the spring of 2021, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be approaching the negotiation a little bit differently, because they do not have a clue whether their attendance is going to be 100%, 80%, or even 40% of the numbers. And you're either going to work with them, or you're going to be pushing back against them. And we've already seen examples when we've dealt with the March and the April fall off of business and people deciding, are we postponing, are we cancelling? We've already seen on the online forums examples of frustration where that, you know, that understanding, that empathy and that heart hasn't been there on a venue side as well as from the meeting planner side. So critically important. Erik's absolutely right. You're supporting, you're not delivering a service. Delivering will come later.
Exactly. Thank you. Tiffany, what would you say? Mark really touched on the fact that, you know, everything changes, but business still happens, but we have to be prepared for how the contracting process might change. From your perspective, what are some of the changes that we might expect to see, or that people should proactively plan on when it comes to the contracting process? Any advice, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I know all of the planners on the call today have scoured their contracts for those two infamous words of force majeure, and we can talk ad nauseum about it. But I think what's critical moving forward is to look at both it from a cancellation perspective, but really critically to what Mark has said, from an underperformance perspective. And as we work with our partners at venues and hotels and such, we all want to do what's right at the end of the day. And what's right may be what Mark has said, that it's 40% of your attendees that are there and not 100% of your attendees. So my advice to planners would be, as you're working on new contracts, is to really look at that aspect of underperformance of, yes, we're going to be able to move forward, but for whatever reason, you know, it could be that we're still seeing certain regions of the world with travel bans where the rest of your attendance can still potentially be there, but, you know, Asia Pacific or Europe or what have you might not be. And if that's a huge part of your attendance, that's certainly going to impact everything. So I think as planners, we can sometimes get caught up in the, it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. And we don't look at what does it happen. And it just is lower attendance, lower food and beverage, less hotel guest rooms being heads in beds, all of those things. So that would be my number one piece of advice, is really look at it from a underperformance as opposed to a straight cancellation under force majeure moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
And Tiffany, I think that's a great point, because I think you can say the same thing to a venue, right? You can say, you can either be all in or not, and say, this is the way it is and we expect you to have everything, or, and it's much better to get something right now, like a smaller event, or, you know, something with not as large scope, than it is to get nothing at all and to have someone simply walk away and find someone else. And so I think your advice is really appropriate in a contracting world for everyone, is that, again, it may not be this way forever. Just like everything, we go in cycles, and it seems like we come back around and we'll reinforce the hard deadlines and we'll reinforce the cancellation policies and things like that. But for now, the best things that both groups can do is really just work together and find contract language that gives enough flexibility to allow things to continue at whatever scale they're going to be able to do that, with enough tightness in there to just not let it be a free rein one way or the other.
And the other thing, Chuck, if I could just add one more thing.
Yes,
The other thing I would say to Erik's point is, we really have no clue when this is going to end. And there are plenty of groups who haven't contracted events yet that are in their normal cycle to contract. So I would also say, look at a good rebooking clause. Obviously, a venue would be happy to have you come back if you can agree on new dates, and having that in your contract to allow you to apply a portion or all of those payments instead of just paying a cancellation penalty will also certainly help your bottom line if you can rebook in the same venue.
Good. That's really good. One of the things that we were talking about the other day was the language of penciling you in as opposed to contracting you. You know, let's get something on the books, knowing that it may change. Let's get something on the books. And you know, I've had some venues that we've talked to said, I'm not getting flexibility from upper level management to be more flexible with contracting. And I actually think that that's going to hurt venues in the long run, those that don't exercise and demonstrate some flexibility in their booking policies based upon what we're currently doing, at least for things being rebooked based on this. So thank you so much for that. We had a question here that I think I would like to ask, because it kind of goes along with this. So we've been talking about planners, we've been talking about venues, but what about planners who are seeking sponsorships for their events? Is there any advice you can give to those associations and organizations and corporations that reach out to their vendors for sponsorship? Well, how do we frame that kind of language right now and that approach? Any panelists have anything to add there?
I'll take a stab at that one. So it kind of ties in with what you said, Chuck, about penciling sponsorships in, getting contracts in the door, being flexible with your payment terms or your cancellation penalties, recognizing what are your fulfillment windows and what are going to be your drop dead order dates for whatever those potential sponsorship items are, working with those vendors to push out those decision dates as close to your meeting if you can. I sort of also equate it to the airline policy of, we recognize that we just don't know what we're in here, and we won't charge you a change fee if you're going to book your flight between now and whatever date for the next 12 months. If you sort of apply that logic in your conversations with your sponsors, that could help as well. But I also think, to both Mark and Erik's points earlier, it's about relationship building, right? So I think in this scenario, you just have to get on the phone and have some honest, heartfelt conversations with sponsors. I think we all recognize at the end of the day, the money that comes in from sponsors is a huge factor in the ability to have a meeting to begin with. So, really get on the phone with those long-term sponsors and have those conversations and work with them as best as you can, given the circumstances. And I think you'll still see people do their best to commit where they can.
Yeah, Tiffany's. Oh, beg your pardon. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark. I can wait.
I'll be real quick, and then Alison as well, I know, has got a question that she wants to pose. But flexibility is key. But the other part of it, and this is less from a venue perspective and more from IACC's perspective, when you're in the position, it's only when you're in this position that you realize the level of risk you have, when the only opportunity with a sponsor, with a vendor, is to turn up at your event to have exposure to your attendees, to your members. We're learning very quickly that we should have in place multiple touch points leading up to the event, at the event, and after the event, so that the live event, as important as that is just one of those components. And if that goes away, or if that moves, you're still providing a commercial opportunity for those suppliers, because all of a sudden your model as an association may have switched from earning revenue to run your association from your one single event in a year to running online opportunities and connections and building communities in different ways. So your resilience in the future will come from having multiple platforms to make those connections.
Erik?
So I think this is a really exciting topic and opportunity when you're looking at sponsorship, to reimagine and co-create with those sponsors what that will look like in the future state. So as somebody who has worked on hundreds of conferences and sponsorship prospectus packages of the same, laundry list of things you can pick from, I think as we see there's going to be a reality that you're going to have a reduction in attendees. I don't think that has to mean a reduction in dollars in sponsorship. It just means you have to reimagine what those sponsorships can look like. And I would talk to them first. I would talk to those sponsors and say, what do you want this to look like? if you've got these eyeballs and you've got, because you're going to have less sponsors, but you might have sponsors that increase their spend because they're going to have a better audience or a more direct audience. So I actually think in all of this turbulation, this is one of the most exciting opportunities to really reimagine what those relationships look like and how you can co-create those sponsorships and how you can look at creating experiences for the attendees and for the sponsors to add value. So I think it's a great part of this.
Joel, anything you want to add to that before we go on here?
No, I think the other panelists have handled it really well.
Excellent. I am going to say one thing, and that is that we are one of those sponsors for many associations and organizations. And it really resonates with me what you just said, because we will be evaluating, like everybody else, what we will provide in sponsorship in the year to come. And what's most important to us is, where do we see value in our sponsorship? What would be the return on investment for me and my company? What's the hard ROI, but also what's the soft ROI? Because what I find a lot is we have associations that we work with that provide us with a whole wide range of partnership benefits for being a sponsor. And we have other ones where we're treated kind of very much like on the outside, in the periphery of the event, and the money's very apparent what's most important. And I think sponsors are going to be looking for that place, or those places where their sponsorship dollars equate to partnership and participation. So thank you so much. Allison, do we have a question that you'd like to have asked? I think I heard somebody say that you had a question there.
We did have a question come in. I think that a lot of what you guys have said kind of covered it, but there is one little piece of it. We're talking about building relationships at the beginning of the webinar, and they were asking if you have a suggestion on how to reach out to those clients. I think they're asking what's the best approach. Maybe is it over the phone, email? Do you have an opinion on that?
I can take this one, at least from my perspective, as a CEO who strangely seems to have a lot more time on my hands than I did before, because my team is doing great. I've been calling. I have been on the phones, just chatting, just checking in, not talking about business, not talking about ways that we're going to work together, but just honestly calling them and, how are you doing? What do what challenges are you running into? Is there anything we can help you with? We provided our Zoom account for free to a couple of clients while they were trying to get their technology infrastructure in place. And so really I've gone back to, my early sales days in the, mid 90s of picking up the phone and just calling people and carving out 2 hours a day and just getting on the phone and chatting with people and hearing about their kids and families and all that kind of stuff. So that's my take.
100% agree. I think it's absolutely what you said, Erik. It's just getting on the phone and talking about life. We're all going through this together. We're all trying to, granted, I'm not a parent, but I can empathize with parents who are trying to be a teacher, worker, spouse, dog walker, all of the things. And just finding that, we all are in this together, I think. So yeah, nail on the head there.
I think that's one of the most unique things about what we're experiencing right now is I can't think of anyone who's not touched in some way or another, or impacted or affected in one way or another by what is happening right now. It's truly, when we say we're all in this together, we are truly all in this together. It doesn't matter where you're at, So, all right. So we have another question, Allison, I believe.
We do. This one's getting a couple likes and it's being upvoted, so I want to make sure this gets in. Do you recommend implementing a discount strategy in order to take the financial hardship facing many potential clients into consideration?
I can take a first pass at this one. I would say yes. I would say that if you can work that into your own financial strategy, I mean, again, I think everyone has to remember that there's two sides to an equation here. And so planners and events are obviously concerned about attendance and number of, paid registrations and things like that. And maybe some lost business that they're trying to recover for. Venues are doing the same thing. But I think absolutely, if someone can find a way to provide incentives or discounts, or even if it's to build in tiers and say, look, if you get 100 registrants at this event, we'll do a 5%, and if you get 200, we'll do 10%. So again, there's an incentive on both parties here to foster an environment of success. I think that that's going to be a big part of the way in which we see the world rebound, not just in meetings and events, but in everything. I can't tell you how many emails I get right now from restaurants and others that are, again, trying to stay afloat, that are saying buy one get one free, or order these 3 items and we'll throw in a 4th, and things like that. And I think, again, the idea is to try to bring it to a level that people can handle, given the limited financial resources they're going to have, and come up with strategies. Again, you can't give away the farm, and people shouldn't expect people to give away the farm, but there are ways to look at your costs and say, hey, normally we charge to throw in these pieces of equipment, but really they're already paid for and someone was going to set them up anyway, so do I have to charge for this event now? And can I go back to doing that in a year or so? Or different value added services that you can throw in because they don't really cost you that much, that again, normally you might have upcharged and sold. And for now, you can add those things in as a value add. So again, yes, I would encourage everyone to look for ways in which they can find those things, the things that don't cost them nearly as much to do, or that just really bring an attractiveness to your venue or your location, and to offer those to planners and to clients.
Anyone else like to chime in?
Yeah, I'd like to express caution when it comes to pricing, because I think, as we've talked about already, flexibility is key. If you're faced with a pricing only question or negotiation, and you haven't looked and evaluated what's of the highest value, then you can be, you may do yourself a disservice as a meeting planner. So I would look at the value that's important, what is going to be important in terms of delivering for your meeting. And then also from a venue perspective, consider that even when we come back, it will not be business as usual. It will take weeks and months for supply chains to recover, for the types of food and style of food that you had at your conferences. Some of that food is going to be twice as expensive to be able to get to that venue and put on that table. So the cost variances are going to be there for some months to come. So you may need to work with the venue and the meeting planner to sit down and say, right, okay, if we need to find this value, let's look at the service style, let's look at the food and beverage provision, and let's find a way, and it may come down to the fact that it is a pricing issue at the end of the day, but explore all of the opportunities and make that a part of the consideration, as opposed to the only consideration, because it's highly likely that it is not the only consideration.
I think at any given time, you have to know what your floor and your ceiling is realistically from a pricing perspective. And you have to know when it doesn't make sense, right, to go further. I mean, one of the questions that's popping up here is that, how do you work with someone who's expecting you to give a fire sale price to them when that fire sale price that they might be expecting is not realistic based upon what your budget needs to be in order to service that? So, if anybody wants to speak to that, that is one of the concerns that's popping up here on the screen, is that, there will be people who want to kind of take you down as low as they possibly can and keep negotiating down. And how do you communicate that you've got a floor that you can't go below?
I mean, I think it doesn't matter what business you're in, when you have prospective clients or client partners, or however you want to refer to it, that are just looking for the fire sale, they're not your right customer. And that's okay. Making making those decisions in hard times will have so much long-term value. And so, you know, I've seen a lot of my competitors offering their services at a fraction of the cost. And I get it. They're, you know, they got to put food on the table for their families and themselves and things like that. But if you start getting into the fire sale game, you're never going to get out of it. You're going to be crawling your way out of it.
Allison, what are some of the questions I see that's really, there's some lively activity on the questions, please?
Yeah, we're getting a lot coming in here. I think a lot of folks want to know if there's venues on here, which there are. What are you doing in your local communities to help? Is anyone hosting blood drives or other types of events to support essential businesses? Is anyone cooking off food that's sitting in their fridge or giving them to the hospital workers? Let's throw some ideas out on how we can all keep top of mind and offer real help during this crazy time. And Chuck, I think maybe you might want to talk about what Unique Venues is doing as well.
Yeah, one of the things that Unique Venues initiated is that we have 1,100 venues that we work with. So we've reached out to all of our venues to find out what kind of emergency response support they may be able to provide to FEMA on a national basis, a statewide and provincial basis, and local basis as far as response, whether that be in the, some of them are for mass feeding of healthcare workers. Some people are saying they're available for housing. Some of our venues are taking some of their housing and making it available for non-COVID medical use. Some are using their housing for and lodging for medical staff, because some medical staff don't want to go home and infect their families, so they're quarantining them in buildings, and some of our buildings are there. Some of our buildings are making themselves available for operations centers. So we actually have developed a link to a page that I believe is uniquevenues.com/emergency-response. And we have collected all of the addresses for FEMA regional offices, statewide emergencies, governor's offices, lieutenant governor's offices, and we are communicating this page as a resource for them to go to find places that are making themselves available for various crisis response units. So that's one of the things that we are doing for the venues that we serve, making themselves available. What are any other suggestions that you can make of ways that venues can make themselves, or things that they could be doing right now that you've heard out there from the panelists?
I see one question in here about using this time to invest in your venue. And I think that's kind of a similar thing, right? Maybe you can't support FEMA, but maybe this is the time where renovations, or while those are still essential services, or times that you can invest in your technology infrastructure, in your facility itself, any of those things. I think that's a great time right now. I know we're doing it as a company, is what can we fix or improve on the things that that we've been putting on the back burner for months.
And think of it as well as a motivational, a really important motivational tool as well. So encouraging your staff, you know, whether that's to be helping the community, whether it's handing over your kitchens to be able to feed important community groups that otherwise are not being looked after. As well as doing great stuff in the community, you are by default keeping your team and your staff motivated, because the one thing I know of being in the hospitality industry for as many years as I have is that we are not happy unless we're putting a smile on someone's face. So think about all of those frontline operational teams, our waiting staff, our chefs, etc. If they're sat at home doing nothing, they will be becoming demotivated and frustrated with the situation. So, you know, again, Erik's making that point of, you know, using this time really wisely to be able to plan and do some good stuff that we would never have had the time before, but also from a social responsibility perspective, let's do some good that will keep, you know, our hearts beating. And then when we do that, talk to our customers. When you know, Erik said about just picking the phone up, not for business, but just pick up the phone and share something that a member of the team has done with the community, or a project that's been supported by the organization in these weeks, because it really matters, and that is what our customers will remember when we get back to whatever level of normality it is in the coming months.
Tiffany, there's a question here, Ali. I'm going to ask Beth's question, if that's okay, because it has 8 thumbs up. And Tiffany, we'll start with you. As meetings return, will social distancing be a concern, and how are venues and planners addressing those concerns?
Good question. I honestly, I think it depends on how long this lasts. I hate to say it, but as human species, we often return to normal fairly quickly after a crisis has passed. So I know there's definitely concerns about, like, for instance, buffet lines. Will we be moving to a new normal of servers serving attendees at buffet lines, or will it go back to how it's always been? And I think it's twofold. I really can see both sides of the coin here, that depending upon how long this goes and the ramifications of it, we could see things like that. We could see new room sets that are allowing for, that recommended 6 feet of distance. That certainly comes with challenges, obviously, because we're going to be seeing a reduced capacity overall in meeting sets. But the optimist in me would say that once this crisis has passed, I don't know how long those sorts of things will be happening, as opposed to more proactiveness of personal hygiene. We might see more hand sanitizer stations throughout facilities and things like that. And, not to make a plug for sponsorship, but that is an opportunity of sponsorship in bathrooms, right? A little cheekiness there, but I could see that more so than this long protracted sense of we're no longer going to be serving ourselves at buffet lines in 3 years from now. The planner in me doesn't see that personally.
Joel, anything you'd like to add?
I tend to agree with that. I mean, again, I think it would be the whole point of a meeting or an event is to get people together. And so you can't say, okay, let's hold a meeting, but make sure all the chairs are 6 feet apart. You can't say, let's do a networking event, but no one can shake hands. I mean, as a society, when it's time, when we're ready to come back together and meet, we're going to do that. And there might be a few heightened things that people look for or ask for, but generally I think there's going to be a collective sigh of relief for those people that feel comfortable participating. And as we know, there are people now that we can't even get to practice social distancing techniques. Those people and many others are going to be ready to get back out and to embrace the opportunity to gather together, and probably are going to be less concerned about whether there's a server at the buffet or not.
I'd like to just point out that one of our attendees sent a message just to the panelists, and I like what she has to say. Diane said, can we start using the term physical distancing versus social distancing? In many ways, we've been socializing more through technology. So maybe we start to kind of create and be people who are beginning the movement. So thank you, Diane, for that. That's an excellent point, that we want to talk about physical distancing as opposed to social distancing, because we are, in a sense, for me, I've been more social with a lot of people that I hardly ever talk to. Almost every Sunday night, we have all of our relatives from throughout the country that I normally would see every couple of years at a family reunion, all on a virtual meeting together, talking about life and having fun and getting caught up. And that never would have happened had it not been for this. I guess some of the silver linings there that you can think of. So thank you so much for that. And I do appreciate it. Okay, so we are already at 2:45, and so we want to just get to a couple of the last questions that people have here. Ali, what are some of the most thumb up ones that we might want to ask to our panel of experts?
Yeah, so these questions come from universities, and on behalf of their events departments, going back to the virtual meetings and everything, or does anybody have any suggestions on unique virtual commencement options, as well as suggestions for virtual recruiting or acceptance day events?
so we can make that more a general statement. Any ideas or creative ways that any of our panelists can think of, or people can chime in through their responses, not just commencement, but let's say any kind of ceremonial large gathering event. How is it, what is the best ways, or what are any of the trends that you may be seeing out there that people are able to capitalize on what used to gather thousands of people together to now bringing it into their homes? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think I don't know, I'm surprised I'm going to say this, but I think that the entertainers on nightly TV, the Jimmy Kimmels of the world, are showing us great examples of how you can still deliver meaningful content and information and speeches and things like that. I think it's going to have to be creative. The 10-year anniversary of The Office, and I can't remember the actors' names off the top of my head, but you know, they did a 10-year kind of chat together, and it was great. And I watched all the content, and so I think it's just going to be a matter of who you select from a commencement speech, making sure you're bringing levity to the conversation or to the delivery is going to be important, but also addressing the fears I think that a lot of students and emerging professionals or young people are going to have, and making sure that you balance that, addressing what's, you know, where their fears are, but also bringing some levity to the fact that a lot of, like we've said, a lot of us have been through some of this, you know, 2008 and, you know, 9/11, and we come out of this. I think Tiffany said this, right? It's like we will come out of this, but we don't know what that future looks like yet. So,
and I think with that, I want to let's see if there's any other kind of very universal questions out there. I do see one that I'd like to pose from looking here, is that people are commenting that they've been using the unique venues /resources page as a source of resources. But are there any other pages that you can recommend, or any other sites that you can recommend that have been excellent resources? And I'm going to toss that out to you first, Mark, from an IACC perspective. As one of our partners, is that
on specifically related to COVID-19 or other resources online?
Is that it's COVID?
COVID. Okay, COVID. Yes. Well, one of the most comprehensive, I think, is the COVID-19 page, which is managed by Events Industry Council, because they've been pulling in a lot of resource and links through to the other organisations and associations out there, and seem to have a good global perspective. So I take a look at Events Industry Council, and look at those. They've also included some of their webinars on demand that are addressing industry expert panels like yours today on this subject as well.
Thank you. Tiffany, any special resource pages that you would like to recommend?
Not necessarily a special resource related to COVID-19 as the disease and such. I would go in a little bit in a different direction. I think keeping a watchful eye on your particular destination. So setting up Google alerts and subscribing to social media related, the governor's office, the mayor's office, all of those sort of entities that are more destination or city specific. So you really can keep a good boots on the ground view. I would say that especially for those planners looking at fall events, which I think everyone is very much, what are we going to be at in the fall? I would recommend that only because I think all of us can get existing COVID-19 resources from, a wide variety of sources that are doing an excellent job. But when you're looking at your venue and your hotel and maybe their staff is currently furloughed, you really are having to do the work yourself to get the accurate information. So I would recommend favoriting things and just kind of creating your own dashboard to a degree. that is specific to where you're holding your meeting later in the year.
I'm going to ask another question. This will be the last one we asked before our final question that I have listed here, but I find this question interesting, and that is assisting and aiding in goodwill to current customers and past clients at this time. So we're all customers or clients. It doesn't matter if you're a venue or if you're a planner for an association event, we all have clients. So what are some best practices that you've experienced through this time as a goodwill gesture or some small act of kindness that one of your suppliers has done for you that's really resonated with you? Let's go with, well, Tiffany, I'm going to start with you because right now you're front and center on my screen. So I'm going to go with you first.
So I think it's a couple of things. I think what Erik said earlier about honestly really getting on the phone and talking with those in your network is critical. I think it's lending with empathy, and whether that lending is your expertise, your time, a listening ear. I joke in my personal circle that while I love and adore my husband, he's not in the industry. So we can talk till, I'm blue in the face about what's going on, but, sometimes you really need to talk to somebody who truly knows what we're going through. So I think lending with empathy is really important. And I also think leading with compassion is really important. And we haven't really touched upon it during this webinar, but all of us have employees or lead teams. And we're not working from home. We're going through a crisis, being a parent, being a teacher, while attempting to work from home. Let's be frank here. So I think it's a matter of, lending with empathy and leading with compassion in times like this. At the end of the day, is the best way, in my personal opinion, to extend goodwill. Is how I would frame that.
And an example of what Tiffany has just said is that, there are only two things that we know right now. One is venues have got a lot of space, and the other is, doesn't matter who our clients are, they are affected by this crisis. Doesn't matter what industry they're in. So one great example that I would give is, as soon as that customer needs to come together, as soon as the restrictions are lowered, why not reach out to your customer and say, when you need to meet, and when you need to start planning your strategic recovery, we're going to give you the space at the venue for a group of however many, but we want your first face-to-face meeting to be with us and on us. That would be an excellent way of showing that empathy that Tiffany has just made a very, very valid point on.
Excellent.
I'm going to throw in two additional ones that I experienced this week, only because I think that they bring some levity to it as well, which is a friend of mine owns a large catering company. Obviously, that catering company has been turned upside down. They switched their business model in a matter of 7 days to do home food delivery for all organic meals. And what I thought was really cool was they included a roll of toilet paper in the box. And because they've got hundreds of thousands of rolls of toilet paper, because they keep them on stock for when they're catering events and blah, blah, blah. And so I thought that was just a genius little touch. Another company that we work with sent out fresh cookies from David's. I want to say David's Cookies to every single one of their customers, and employees, which I thought was a pretty impressive. Who, unfortunately, I am eating more right now under these circumstances, and getting a box of pretty good fresh cookies was not a bad touch. So those little things I think are helpful. And likewise, like I said, on the reverse, we extended a lot of things to our clients where we just say, if you need access to our Zoom, if you want to talk to our CFO about how we're handling pay decreases and things like that, we've been providing a lot of consulting services that historically we would have charged for. We're doing for free.
Excellent.
I think the one other thing I'd add to the comments already is that I think it's also important to speak honestly, but also share whatever level of optimism that you have. I think for a lot of people right now, they need a steady voice, and you may not feel as a venue person or as a, you might not feel like you're going to be the rock in someone else's world, but you might be. You might be the one person right now that gives them that little bit of hope. Again, no one on this panel today has been like, hey, this is all going to clear up in 3 weeks. Like, I think we all know we're in for the long haul here, but I think you could hear a sense of optimism from almost everyone. And I think it's important as you're communicating with your clients, in whatever way, shape, or form that you have, that you're honest, but that you remember that you might be that voice that they need to hear that day that says, we will get through this. I've been peeking at the poll results a little bit as they come in, and it seems like most of the audience has some measure of optimism out there about, yeah, we're in for a difficult time here, but we're going to come through it. And I think it's important to also portray that image in the messaging that you have with your customers and clients.
Excellent.
Hey, Chuck, can I add one more thing?
Oh, yes, please.
I noticed a question come in about support groups, chat support groups. There is, on Facebook, there is a group called Hospitality Family that, as it says, that's what it's and who it's for. So I would encourage anyone in our industry to join that. And I know there's tons of others out there. That just happens to be one of the ones that I'm in. That is a great sounding board for just, feelings, but also concrete information. Everything from, how to apply to unemployment to how do we manage this when we come through this in the fall. It's just a ton of chats and comments that are through that. So I would encourage everyone, if you're not on different socials for the industry, that's a great way to really get some support.
And I'd just like to add, there's a lot of questions that I see popping up here. I sure wish we can answer all of them, but many of you, the vast majority are affiliated with Unique Venues, and we do have a forum at Unique Venues, so please do not forget that you can go ahead and pose your questions like about large ceremonies virtually and things like that at forum, FORUM, at uniquevenues.com. And you can post that on there, and then your fellow venue members through Unique Venues can also communicate that way. My last question as we prepare to part is that this goes back to something that Tiffany just said, but what is that one piece of or maybe it was Joel, what's that one piece of encouragement that you'd like to pass on to the attendees before, if you can charge them with something from a standpoint of encouragement, what would be the one thing that you would say to everybody on here today? Tiffany?
I would say we have been meeting since the ancient Roman times, and that is not going to change. We will come through this, and we will be seeing all of our lovely friends and colleagues and association members face to face. We may not know when that is, but it will happen. So my advice really is to take it one day at a time, and to grant yourself grace and mercy. It's unique circumstances that we're in. As Mark pointed out, this is affecting every industry globally. So I would just say grant yourself some grace and mercy. And if you have to step away from it and go for a walk, get outside. It is the best thing that I can recommend to people is get outside of your house and go for a walk.
Okay, great. Mark.
Quite simply, the connections that you have now are what are going to define you when we come out of the other side of this. And they can either be good, positive connections or negative, but believe you me, they're going to count more than they've ever done before. So use every single moment you have to have positive connections, and you will be in a great position when we come out the other side. That's it.
Thank you. Erik?
I'm going to steal this one from my business partner, Alex, which is slow down to speed up. And I think that's what some of what Tiffany was saying is right now, I think our inkling is to panic, and I think we need to slow down, and that's going to help you speed up eventually. And then I'm also going to echo, go outside. I got up this morning and went outside and did 100 jumping jacks and push-ups and stuff that I never do, and I felt 25% better than I did yesterday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So
excellent, thank you. Joel.
I would say that I'm really inspired by the amount of kindness that I see in the world these days. Even looking today when we were talking about, how can people do outreach, there were all sorts of people sending messages to the panelists saying our institution is doing this, our group is doing that. I think it's really reminding us how much we need to depend on one another, and how some of the small petty stuff just really isn't that meaningful in a time like this. And I'm hoping that to Tiffany's point earlier, we all do come back around and we kind of go back to our old habits. I'm optimistic that maybe there will be a small change in the way that we all treat and interact with one another by having to spend this amount of time being physically isolated, or whatever the term was that we're going to start promoting. I'm hoping that when it does start to subside, that we all remember the way we felt about one another and the way that we're treating one another, the way that we're supporting the world around us, and that we continue to do that long after we're talking about COVID-19.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I just want to remind everybody before we close that we will be, I'm going to go back and share my screen here. We have more webinars on the way that we'll be sharing with everybody. Let me get to the place where I can actually share my screen. Here I go. Okay. You should be all seeing this right now. I do want to share the next upcoming programs with you. So we've got a wellness workshop, part 1. So we're trying to take a very comprehensive approach to this. So we've got some very targeted educational single subject webinars. We've got panel discussions such as this one. We've got panel discussions just for venues, some just for planners, some for both groups, and we've got wellness oriented ones. Some of the things we have upcoming is a wellness workshop on enhancing your emotional well-being led by Dr. Michael Brown on April 7th at 2 p.m. Registration, if I'm correct, can be found at uniquevenues.com/resources for that. We have one preparing for the rebound part 2. We had a great session yesterday. The recording is on the resources page that was on preparing for the rebound part 1. And it was called Social Undistancing. And it was all about using social media to connect with your clients, past, present, and future through social media during these times. That you can listen to that at uniquevenues.com/resources. Part 2 is on data mining on April 9th. How is it that you could take this time that you have on your hand to go out and curate and harvest new potential clients to reach out to and build into your databases? And then Unique Venues is a partner member of NACIS, the National Association of College Auxiliary Services. We are actually hosting a webinar through NACIS, Life After COVID-19, on April 14th at 3 p.m. Currently, that is full. It is being waitlisted, but if you do want to be a part of that, you can go ahead and contact NACIS at nacis.org to be a part of that and get on their wait list. So we thank everybody for today. I just want to say, Tiffany, Erik, Mark, and Joel, I cannot thank you enough for providing your expertise and sharing your thoughts and viewpoints with these 450 people or so that was on here at Maximum. We appreciate your volunteering your time and your authoritative voices in a really strange time. Thank you so much for this, and we look forward to connecting with you more in the future. Thanks, everyone.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.